Manny, thank you for joining us tonight. So I want to start with the CNN case against Nunez, because it is very hard to prove a defamation case against a public figure, such as Devin Nunes in this case. Can you walk us through that process and really tell us what Nunez has to prove?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you for having me. So this is a difficult case, and it will be difficult for Representative Nunez because he is a public figure. So most defamation cases that you hear, the individuals are private individuals. In those cases, those litigants move forward and don't have to prove malice or bad intent. So effectively, as a public figure, Representative Nunez has to prove that not only are the reports false, that he did not meet with the Ukrainian official, the former prosecutor in the Ukraine, but also that CNN knew about it and nonetheless recklessly with malicious intent went forward in an effort to hurt him and hurt and impugn his reputation.
What type of evidence would help corroborate that claim for Nunez? Would it be something like emails, phone calls, or is it just kind of providing documents that say this was easily something that could be searched? Is that not enough for something like this?
Well, it could be all the above, right? In terms of if they get to the point of discovery, then obviously whatever's out there that is in that domain of discovery to be provided to help the case should be provided. But I think at the end of the day, the most important thing is allegedly CNN is relying upon the testimony of Mr. Lev Parnas. I think that's fundamentally the issue, right? Because now Mr. Parnas is the scope of the investigation, violating campaign finance laws and other things. So right now, he's a very vulnerable person and he's a very vulnerable defendant, I'll say. Therefore, does he lack any credibility going forward? Is he reaching right now? I mean, what is really the liability of Representative Nunez? I think his case is important. I think it's important because I think politicians and public figures do need to fight back. And they can't just rely upon the fact, oh, I'm a public figure, therefore any media, any outlet, any newspaper, there's so many social media publications, right, that I'm going to call, news publications now, right? I'm going to categorize them as I would the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and CNN. What is their liability in terms of verifying sources before they go forward? What do they actually do to verify the integrity of their source and the truthfulness of what they're reporting?
How do you go about something like that if a news outlet, for example, reports based on anonymous sources and a public figure, say a politician, says, oh, this article is fake? I mean, is there a way to get to those sources, determine whether or not it's accurate, whether or not they're legitimate sources, or is that just something that has to be accepted in the journalism community nowadays?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, it's an anonymous source to the extent where it's not a named source. That source is not anonymous clearly to the news organization. They're just covering the identity of that individual because that individual is worried about, fear of reprisal or whatever, to the extent that if they're outed and their name is outed, that people would actually go after them and hurt them. So yes, to the extent where now we could get into a question of First Amendment, to what extent should an individual be shielded if they claim to be an anonymous source, if they're trying to leak either sensitive information or information that's compromised? I mean, look at the whistleblower. Do we know who the whistleblower is, right? So anybody could make a report about hearsay or based on hearsay, and then the media in this very aggressive world that we're in just moves forward without verifying the truthfulness of what they're reporting. That's a big question, and that's a great question. I think hopefully this lawsuit will answer some of those questions.
Yeah, I mean, I hope so too, because this is actually something that is very important to the journalism industry, and it seems to be something that's kind of moving along. I mean, we live in a time where the word fake news is thrown around so liberally, I guess you could say, but there are some legitimate claims stemming from that, and I'm really glad that we had you on tonight, because you kind of walked it through for lay people like me. But Manny, we'll be sure to have you on again and kind of walk us through this entire process. Thank you for joining us tonight.